Hey gang, Pete Williams here, and middle of Australia summer, and we've got the barbecue cranking for the first video in a series I'm calling BBQ+A. Hope you get that really bad pun there. And I've got my good buddy Josh Cairns here to talk about some really cool stuff that I think a lot of you guys face as a hurdle and friction point when you're growing your business, and that is cold approaching. You've had some huge success with your app business, doing apps for some of the biggest companies in Australia. You're now importing stuff from the US and approaching retail outlets to stock those goods. So we're going to talk about how to actually go about identifying your target market for joint venture partners or clients, how to actually approach them, get the door open, get through that gatekeeper and making the deal happen, because you've done that so many times and it's something that I want to get better at and I want to learn from as well. So let's throw a shrimp or two on the barbie, have a few snags, open some beers and have a chat with you about how you actually go about doing this cold approaching.
Sounds good.
Oh Lord.
Alright. First mishap.
When you're blinded by the trees, you can't see what's really happening in the world outside. You ruin my life. Whoa, can you save me from this fire? From a car crash? Can I escape from this feeling deep? Whoa, can you save me?
Alright, so BBQ+A. Let's get into it, mate.
Looking forward to it, let's go.
Awesome. So I guess a good place to start, to give everyone listening a bit of context from your background before we kind of delve into your approach to getting clients and how you actually go about finding the people and getting the door open. Do you want to give everyone a bit of your background of what you're doing these days, what you've done in the past to get you to where you are today and things like that?
Yeah, sure, mate. Look, for the last couple of years, I've been running a digital agency called Vado Digital. We're a traditional digital agency in the sense we do a little bit of web and a little bit of apps and things like that. But I suppose for the last 18 months, it's really been primarily focused on the app business.
Yep.
Just because it's been of so much interest to the community and also to our clients in particular.
Everyone wants an app.
Everyone does, and I think it's because it's very engaging, and it's also for many of our clients, which are government type clients, that they want to communicate a really personal message.
Yep.
That sometimes might not be something that can be spoken about, or that you don't want to show up in your web history or something. So it's a really personal medium that's in the palm of somebody's hand. They can seek the information they need, maybe help services or whatever it may be.
Yep.
And so it really fits quite well.
So it's not about the traditional app development in the sense of doing games or doing small little apps for your own stuff, but actually going about doing apps for clients and taking all the app development and the platform that's available to actually go out, get high-end clients to pay you good fees to actually develop the app, and you don't necessarily make money on the back end, you get paid a very nice upfront fee to do the development.
That's right. Look, that probably makes up 80% of the business, I suppose, is that traditional agency model. Some of those may be on an ongoing retainer type basis, or some may be just a straight fee for service, project by project basis. But to give you an idea, I suppose some of the clients that we've been really fortunate to work with is we work with the federal government, we work with about 6 or 7 different Victorian government agencies. Yep. We work with Henley Homes, Goodyear Dunlop Tyres, Lifesaving Victoria, Hyundai Australia, V-Line, Drum & Golf. So
huge company.
I suppose that positions us really well in terms of we kind of learn bits and pieces from each client as well. It's not just about providing our service. We actually feel really fortunate that we actually learn from the way that these market leaders go about their own business, and that certainly serves us well as well.
And this is a really cool thing that I've really enjoyed sort of watching the process develop for you, is that most of these clients aren't referral based. You're not doing AdWords advertising. You're not sort of putting yourself as an app developer on somewhere like Elance or Odesk or anything like that. You're going direct to these clients, pitching them to get the work. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, look, more so in the early days, especially in the early days, I think it was probably, as I said, around 18 months to 2 years ago, when apps were a little bit of an enigma. We didn't quite know whether it was a phase that was here for a little while and then going to disappear tomorrow. And obviously, we now know that apps are here to stay, and they've become a really big part of our lives.
Yep.
But I suppose at that time, it was really around painting a picture of what an app can do for a business.
Yep.
And so, since then, we've been fortunate enough. Obviously, we managed to do that really well and execute that really well in those early days. And from there, we're able to leverage a lot of those contacts and a lot of that work we've done in the form of a portfolio to I suppose make that job a little bit easier to introduce ourselves to new prospective clients.
Okay, and this is the really cool thing, is that you're saying in the early days you had no clientele, you didn't do your own apps, and sort of someone said, oh, this is a really cool app that you'll develop, can you do an app for us? It was like straight out, we're going to go and start a business developing apps for clients. So the really cool thing is that the approach you took to actually get these clients in the first place, and this is where I really want to take this Q&A session, is sort of down the path of how do you go and identify your clients, and more importantly, how do you actually go and approach them? Because I think so many people, whether they're trying to do apps for clients like this and run a business doing apps, or whether you're trying to be an agency type thing where you're actually going to do local business marketing, you're going to small, medium clients saying, we'll do your Google AdWords for you, or your Google marketing. You're just trying to get clients. I think for so many people, it is a real friction point, and that's where I want to kind of take this conversation. So can you kind of, I guess, just talk through that process of how you went about identifying a client and going from there, and then obviously we can actually, I'll drill in and ask you deeper questions, but I think something I want to know more, and obviously people watching at home want to find out more as well.
Yeah, look, I suppose that the part of our business that's going to be of most interest to your viewers that may be in that startup phase is certainly our approach in the early days, and I think a lot of it would be what would be classified as cold calling.
Yep.
It was very much around identifying, and look, I suppose I'll go back one step further. When cold calling, when we set our sights on cold calling, I think what I've found is that a lot of companies and a lot of individuals focus a little bit too much on the call itself.
Yep.
So whether that means putting on a certain type of voice or a persona, or whether you're trying to charm the receptionist, or whether you're trying to say the right things, or even try and trick your way in to get to the decision maker that you may have found around the place, that I think a lot of the attention is focused on the call itself. Whereas if the research is done beforehand and the planning is done beforehand, there doesn't need to be any trickery or smoke and mirrors used, that you can very much be yourself and use your own personality and the skills that you've got yourself. That you don't really need to go with any of those tricks. I think where we focus, I suppose, a lot of our planning is very much around, we're trying to, I suppose, think of it from the prospective client's perspective. So rather than the perspective of us, we want to sell an app that does this to this company for this amount of dollars. We think to ourselves, these guys have won, and I suppose almost playing devil's advocate against yourself here, we think to ourselves that one, they've probably received 10 calls from companies exactly like ours this week.
Yeah.
This exact individual has probably told the receptionist, do not let anybody come through to my phone that has this in their pitch, or that says they're here to do apps, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So I suppose with those kind of things in mind, and they're the hurdles that you're going to face, so you might as well pre-plan for them rather than sound like a goose on the phone to the receptionist not knowing how to overcome that. So you pre-plan how to get around that. And I suppose the approach we took was a really proactive, ideas-based approach.
Yep. Okay.
So certainly with one, like, I'll use the example of Goodyear and Dunlop tyres, one of the biggest tyre manufacturers and retailers. They've got 3 or 4 different retail chains as well in Australia. And the way we went about it with them is we thought to ourselves, they don't have, and this is kind of, I suppose, the extent of the research that we do. They don't have a strong digital presence. They've got, obviously, the mandatory digital presence. They've got a website. Yeah. It's not mobile optimized at all. They've got a Facebook page with no followers, Twitter account with basically no followers.
No tweets as well.
No tweets, exactly. It's pretty much inactive. And this is kind of 12 to 18 months ago now. And we thought to ourselves, this is obviously a company that sees or is aware of that there is some value in establishing themselves in the digital space.
And you identified that by saying that they've done something, that obviously they've signed up for a Facebook account, they've got their Twitter accounts, so they actually took some steps. So they're aware that they have to be there at some point. Those didn't stick around in that.
Yeah, I think what we are, exactly, that's the way we went about it, and I think what we concluded from that is that somewhere along the line has mentioned in a meeting, hey, isn't social media cool? Or isn't the web cool? Or isn't digital stuff cool? And so somebody's taken on their shoulders, they've signed up for an account, they haven't either resourced it correctly or haven't had a plan to approach that correctly, and it's kind of managed to fizzle out to a bit of a non-venture.
Yeah, which is so common.
Absolutely, so and I think that's probably one of the really common things when someone first embarks on a social media or a digital campaign that unless it's got a real lot of planning behind it, that it kind of fizzles.
Yeah.
And so we looked at that and we thought this is a really good I suppose, there goes the iPhone, prospect for what we had, which was an idea around an app. So I suppose for us that initial phone call wasn't one that was based on, I suppose, getting a meeting to talk about ideas or to introduce ourselves, which is what so many companies call for. It's just to introduce themselves or whatever. We had it that we've got ideas. We're about to build an app that allows customers to do this, and this.
Yep.
And I can go into that if you like. But for the most part, to broaden it a little bit, that we had an idea of an app that does this, and this, and on that basis, we're doing it anyway. We're offering to have it branded as a Goodyear and Dunlop app.
So I think there's a couple of really key things in there. So something you mentioned before as well, that off camera, was that you went and actually made sure they didn't have a digital agency already in place, which I want to dive into what that means as well. But in terms of what you just said, is you took the approach that we're going to build this app anyway, and they've got the ability to brand it. So you're sort of selling them, not necessarily the app, but an advertising opportunity. Is that sort of more of the positioning that way? Yeah, look,
I suppose with that particular one that we were referring to was very much more of an engagement type strategy. So different apps, as you're aware, have different purposes. Some will be around communication. So if they're looking at or if we feel that the objectives appear to be from the outside around communicating a message or communicating some kind of I suppose message more so than just engagement.
Yep.
Then an app can do that. We can use things like push notifications, we can use a web feed, we can do things like that in there to actually communicate. In the case of the Goodyear Dunlop one, it was very much around engagement. We'd noticed that they'd sign up for a Twitter account, sign up for a Facebook account. They'd obviously seen value in engaging people. If you're not selling, you don't also have to be selling, but just engaging people, putting your brand in front of them alongside things that they will deem to be cool.
Yep.
So I suppose to be a little bit more specific about that, the idea that we had for an app was one that's now been done a couple of times over by a couple of other companies as well. But it was around the basis that you could take a photo of your car from a nice side-on view with your on-screen guides, align the guides with the wheels, and then flick through and basically test drive a bunch of different sets of mag wheels and tyres on your car. And so we'd identified that Goodyear and Dunlop were by far and away the biggest in Australia, and that they had no real strong alliance with a digital agency.
Yep.
We looked at a couple of different websites, the Bow Repairs website and the Goodyear Auto Centre website, and we saw that they had down the bottom of the page in the footer where you've got generally the web agency putting their hand up saying, didn't I do a great job of this?
Website design by or SEO by. Yep.
Exactly. So we looked at that and we saw there were different companies that had done all the different websites. So from that, I suppose we concluded that it ticks the box that they probably haven't got any formal allegiance to a particular digital agency.
Okay, so because each of their sub-brands had different web developers, it's a fair assumption they don't have one contact controlling all of this. They were just sort of splattergun approach, doing it when they need to do that. They didn't have any sort of alignment, because if they've got a digital agency on board covering all their companies, apps would probably fall under that banner. So if you couldn't approach them, so let's say we've already got someone who has the contract for that, whether they do it or not. So by knowing that they'd had different companies do different things, it's fairly likely there's nobody in their world right now doing apps or controlling the app part of their marketing.
That's exactly what we concluded. Look, that doesn't always sort of, I suppose,
it's a good check.
I suppose in terms of playing the percentages, which is all you can do, you can just play the percentages, that we thought that was a pretty big box to tick, that these guys don't appear to have any kind of really solid allegiance to any of these particular companies. And I suppose that the worst case scenario is that you give them a great idea and they go and do it with another agency that they do have an allegiance to, and that's the risk you run.
Well, do you worry about NDAs on that point?
Not even in the slightest.
I think so many people, they go, oh, well, what happens if I go and pitch this company an idea and they run away with it? Or I need to get them to sign a non-disclosure agreement before even meeting them. And I think that just throws up so many red flags and things like that. So you've never worried about that at all?
Not even come into consideration. I get asked about it fairly often.
Let me ask you this question though. Then on the other side of the coin is, you've been in this game for quite a while, as you said before, done some apps for some serious companies who, as you say, get pitched every single day. Have you ever had an idea stolen?
Probably.
Not consciously?
No, not that I'm aware of, or not that I've seen become a big success.
So nothing that you're crying into your pillow at night.
No, and you know what? The way I figure it is, if I was crying into my pillow at night, if it did happen and someone was overly successful with it, then we didn't do a good enough job of our first pitch anyway. Yeah. You know, it's one. The idea is not the foundation of success.
Yeah.
It's the execution of it, and if the first step in that execution is the pitch,
Yeah.
then we didn't do our job. So, and I said I'm not aware of any, but if that was the case, then I think, you know, people are quick to point the finger at others, saying you stole my idea.
Yeah.
No, you didn't execute your idea.
I like that. I like that. So, okay. So from the execution of going in to get the pitch, how do you approach someone like Lifesaving Victoria or Hyundai or going somewhere like Goodyear and approaching them directly? What is the process? Do you just look on their 1-300 number that a person will call up if they're trying to get their tyres changed and call that number and go, who do I speak to? Or how do you actually make that process?
Look, at the risk of, I suppose, giving away one of our biggest secrets that app development companies around the country will just kick themselves over because it's just so simple. The way we do it, because most of our clients now are government clients, we're fortunate to be well ingrained in a lot of the different, I suppose, departments and agencies that work within the government banners, especially in Victoria. All we do, we subscribe to a, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'll send you the link to the email feed that we subscribe to. But it's one that we get now emailed every single day at 6 p.m. We get 30 odd press releases that have come out from the Victorian government. Okay. So all the different government agencies, all the different departments, every single press release that goes through it's the Premier's personal RSS feed on the website. Yep. We get those in an email format, and we basically look through each of those and we think, all right, the Victorian government is about to spend $6 million on water safety, preventing drownings because the drownings report has just come out. So we would call Lifesaving Victoria and any other credited agencies that are mentioned within that press release and say, we see you've got some money to spend on preventing drownings. We have a great way to go about it.
That is awesome. So using so in that scenario, obviously with the government agency, this goes for anything to government, is obviously they've got budgets to spend. If you've not got a budget to spend, why aren't you there taking a piece of that pie?
Correct.
It's kind of your money anyway because you're paying taxes to actually fund that budget. So why don't you get some of it back? And I think that's a killer idea. Is it's taking that thing that we spoke about quite a bit in terms of actually taking an idea and having it brought to you on a silver platter with things like Google Read. You're sort of doing that. You're subscribing to feeds where information is, having it come to you, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, exactly the same premise as a Google Reader is exactly it. Yeah. So in that instance with the government ones, I suppose that's the best answer to your question, is that we look for where the money's going and we kind of position ourselves in those funnels where the money is going anyway. Cool. It just might as well be us.
So that helps you identify a type of client in terms of Lifesaving Victoria or Ambulance Victoria or whoever it might be in that sort of department. How do you know who to speak to? Do you actually just call the name of the person on the media release, or do you do a bit more research?
Yeah, one of the great things is down the bottom they normally have a name, which is generally the communications officer.
Yeah.
Now that communications officer, anytime there's a press release come out, there's I suppose a real hesitancy to engage deeply in a conversation when you contact that person, because their name's on the bottom of a press release. They've probably had 15 or 30 calls that morning after it's gone out from various different companies that see themselves as a good fit for that funding. So they're very good with the handball, just getting rid of the inquiry to kind of dead ends. So I suppose this is where we really do almost break what I mentioned at the start, that people focus a lot on the call themselves. In that instance, we do really go in with just a little dot points on a little dot piece of post-it note or something in front of yourself when you're on the phone. And it's kind of little triggers or hooks, as I think you guys in the internet marketing world kind of call it, is hooks. And we kind of think, what's this communications person going to get excited about? So if it's, as I said, if it's around the life-saving, we kind of have a list of 3 or 4 little hooks that may really trigger some enthusiasm in this person, that they may put you straight through or give you the contact details of the person to speak to. Okay. Either way, that's normally the best starting point, is with the person on the bottom of the press release. And if you can engage them well enough, you can get them excited about the idea to the extent that they're happy to almost put their reputation on the line by referring you through to the
That's cool. You need to be sort of an internal ally, almost.
That's right. You need to establish those internal allies, and I mean, if you that's possible. That's far from unattainable. You can achieve that.
So in terms of those 3 or 4 little hooks, where are they coming from? Are they sort of just ideas that you guys have internally about this is one of the cool ways that Goodyear can get their tyres on more cars by having an app that does that sort of stuff? Is it just sort of 4 or 5 key sentences or key words?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose we'll stick with the example of the life-saving, because that's where we were with it. So I suppose in that instance that we look at at the content on their website is generally a fairly good indication of what they consider to be most important and least important. In terms of, because I always think of it as that we don't know a customer's business anywhere near as well as they do. Whether it's Drum and Golf, one of our clients that obviously know golf retail, we would never ever go in there and pitch anything that wasn't fairly, or at least some semblance of it, was fairly well positioned on their website.
Okay.
So if they think latest offers and fast sales are important, that'll be the general basis of the pitch. If they've positioned that on the front page of the website.
So you're actually looking at what they're already doing and leveraging that. So rather than coming cold with a brand new idea that you've got to try and sell the idea on, you're taking an idea they already believe in, they're already communicating to the market and saying, let's plus this idea, let's make this idea you've already got better. So
every
you're kind
time
of pumping up tyres that already exist in their business.
Complementing on what they're already doing well, or what they believe they're already doing well.
Yeah.
And I suppose in that instance that if someone considers a certain thing to be important, that there is a genuine way, and we know apps are so versatile, that an app can complement almost any strategy that they probably already implementing. So whether that's Googling the CEO's name, finding an interview they did with a magazine, and the different things that they mentioned in the magazine or in that interview, probably give you a pretty good idea of what the company direction is going to be in the subsequent 6 months after that. So touch on those types of things.
I think this is a really cool thing that I love about what you do, is that I'm sure people are listening at home, and I know I've heard this before, is that it's not about the pitch, it's about the preparation. It's not about the pitch, it's about the preparation. And you sort of hear that cliche and go, yeah, I know this, whatever, I'll do a bit of prep, but I've got to make sure I nail this pitch. And you listen to conversations I've had with Oren Claff, and you read books like Pitch Anything, which are very much focused on how you actually choreograph the actual communication during the pitch. And people tend to focus on that because that's it's sexy, it's fun, it's interactive. The preparation is kind of mundane because you're sitting in your room by yourself, Googling press releases and old interviews with CEOs and stuff like that. But when it comes down to it, the success that happens in the real world and stuff that you do and things like that has come from the preparation. It's not necessarily about the actual pitch itself and the communication. We'll touch on that because it's important, but it is really, you literally do, subscribe to these press releases, you write 4 or 5 bullet point hooks down, you actually Google interviews with the CEO and actually trying to get that idea of where they're going before you even pick up the phone.
Every single time.
Yeah.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Yeah, you need to, I think it just gives you some kind of direction. So when you first pick up the phone, if you've done no preparation at all, you could do any call 1,000 different ways. You could just little focus points, inflections in your voice, everything like that. That as I said, that's kind of tricks you don't need to use if you do the right preparation, because you focus on what they're already focusing on.
Yeah. So when it comes to actually picking up the phone and speaking to somebody, what are you trying to get? What's the outcome for the phone call? Is it to actually get the ability to send an email with a written proposal? Is it to get a meeting? Is it to get them engaged enough to actually get the whole idea on the phone call? What is the objective of that conversation when you speak to somebody?
Look, with our particular business, it's always to get a meeting.
Yeah.
That's always, I suppose we back ourselves in that we present fairly well because
your charm and good looks.
Oh, far from it. But I've got much more charming and good looking people that must work for me. But we always back ourselves in that if we can get the meeting, that we're at least going to give a good account of ourselves, and if there is a deal there to be won, we feel like that we're going to position ourselves with a fairly good opportunity to capitalise on that.
Okay.
So our goal is always to get the meeting.
Yep.
The most common two, I suppose, rejections, if we want to call it that, is that I'm too busy, send me an email.
Yep.
And to that, we normally just say, I mean, if it's too busy, too busy is what people get.
Yeah.
That's I'm too busy.
It's a cliche thing. It's the I'm just looking version of the retail.
Correct. It's the tire kicker type situation. I'm just too busy for this. Send me an email and
I might look at it one day.
And that really means you're a nice guy. You sound good on the phone. You don't sound like you're here to trick me.
Yeah.
You sound like you probably are a nice guy. Otherwise, I'd be much more harsh in my response. But you probably are a nice guy, but I'm just not interested. And that's kind of the worst case scenario. You'd almost have rather someone tell you honestly you were terrible. Yeah. You sounded like a con man, or you sounded this, that, and the other. Because at least you can work on that for the next one.
So what's your take? If someone actually does do the I'm too busy, send me an email, do you actually call them on it and say, look, I understand you're flat out. Is it worth me taking the time out of my day to actually put this proposal and email together for you? Will you actually look at it, or do you think you're even too busy to actually look at the email? Do you actually go to that extent and call them on that?
I personally aren't a fan of the email because I know how, you know as well, how easy emails are to ignore.
Absolutely.
I mean, probably, I don't know, probably 4 out of every 5 emails don't even get read.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big fan of the email. Sometimes it'll be necessary to attach a portfolio or a short little about the company type thing, but I don't really. I mean, if someone's too busy to meet with me, I would generally take it as I haven't done a good enough idea of stimulating their excitement or our ability to help them do their job better is what I would think of it. So in that instance, I offer to buy them breakfast. I mean, everyone eats breakfast. Yeah, everyone eats breakfast. Everyone's got to spare 10 minutes over breakfast. I think you told me that once as well. That whether it's a lunch or a breakfast or a dinner or something along those lines, that you can get 10 minutes with someone.
All right, dude. So let's sort of move on. So in terms of in the meeting, is there anything particular that stands out? Any major takeaway from the meeting that needs to be mentioned?
Anytime we attend a meeting, we go in with an outcome in mind.
Yeah.
We haven't got. I suppose we haven't got the resources or really the time to meet for a how do you do.
Yeah.
I suppose there's an element of that. I suppose networking in a way.
Yeah.
That you meet with future opportunities or potential in mind, but. You know, I'm personally of the view that you have a meeting with an outcome in mind, and obviously that outcome is it's not often. I mean, whether it's a large corporate or a government agency, the decision making process does take time. We're not expecting to ever walk out with a signed contract, but I suppose what we are hoping to walk out with is a genuine feeling of enthusiasm that's been conveyed and reciprocated. That we feel like that everyone in the room was kind of on the same page and buzzing with ideas and opportunity, excitement about the opportunity. And normally, if we've done our job correctly, they'll ask us for some kind of a proposal that they can take to management that obviously write the checks. So that's that's normally the outcome that we seek from a meeting itself.
And I think at this point, there's no point really going into depth about how to handle a meeting and things like that, because I do believe the stuff that Oren writes about in Pitch Anything is a great framework for actually how to structure that conversation. Just obviously what we've covered to date is actually how to get to that conversation, which I think a lot of people have trouble with and is a big friction point.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I've read that myself. I think from my perspective around whether it's in the meeting or prior to the meeting, I think that sometimes when people first start out in business, they feel they have to be something.
Yeah.
Whether they've got a mentor or they've got somebody that they not even get mentorship from, but that they admire or that they kind of want to be like.
Yeah.
But sometimes people can fall into that trap of not being themselves. And I know this is getting a little bit cliched as well.
It's a fact.
It is. I mean, you'll always give the best you can of yourself and the skills you have and the experience you've had. If you feel like you can put yourself in your comfort zone in one way or another, and that doesn't mean if you're out of your comfort zone, say no to the opportunity. By no means do that. But anytime you can kind of skew to be within your comfort zone, if you're an extroverted, enthusiastic person, don't dull yourself down because you feel like you need to be professional or straight tie type thing. And on the flip side of that, if you're a fairly polished professional person that likes to go about things methodically, don't feel like you need to be bouncing off the walls with enthusiasm and crazy ideas. You just need to, I suppose, be really comfortable that you'll give the best you can of yourself if you're true to yourself.
And the really cool thing is you're not a programmer. This is something that I probably should have mentioned early on, is that you're not a programmer. You don't know how to write the app, so you don't do this yourself. You've obviously built a team here in Melbourne who does this for you, but technically anybody watching could actually do this and have the development stuff outsourced to someone on Elance or Odesk or someone like that. You could do the pitch and the proposal and the idea, but have the development done offshore, couldn't you? You could still do this business model that way.
No doubt about it. Look, I've really intentionally over the last 18 months made a conscious decision not to know anything about the development side of it. I think that most of our clients that we meet with don't care, and everyone, whether they know this or not, will find this out. Your clients don't care about the technical side of it.
Yeah.
They don't care how an app works. They don't care anything about it. All they care about is the outcome that app or that website or that gizmo, whatever it might be that you're building, whatever impact that will have for their business. That is all they care about. So, as I said, I've made a conscious decision not to know about it because I think the temptation is to talk about things that you know about.
Yeah.
And I know that if I went into these meetings talking about technical jargon that nobody cares about, that's going to have a detrimental effect. So I'd rather not know.
That's the same thing with our phone system stuff. I still have no idea how to install or program up a phone system, but we sell them every single day all around the country. All right, so given that you don't know anything about development, let's change the topic completely.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what you're up to now. So obviously you've still got the digital agency, still doing that stuff, which is really cool, but you sort of systemize that business and it's running itself, which is probably a whole other conversation one day. But I want to talk about the importing, the golf stuff.
Well, it's something that I'd never done before. I've had experience in, I suppose, different types of business, but importing and distribution was a string that I didn't have on my bow.
Yeah.
So that was something that I've always been intrigued by, because it obviously opens you up to a whole different skill set.
Yep.
And so we've started importing now. We're the Australian New Zealand distributor for a product called the OptiShot home golf simulator.
Which is a passion of yours, golf, which is really cool.
It is. I'm a terrible golfer. If anyone out there's played golf with me, they'll know that I'm just terrible and frustrated, which is not a pleasant. Doesn't make for good company.
I just don't go out anymore. I just
it doesn't make for good company at all on a golf course. But so I do play golf a lot, actually. So it was a good fit for me, I suppose. It almost fits into that category of doing something that's I think we all know you can kind of make a buck doing whatever. You can always find a way to make a buck. That I suppose I decided that this was something that I wanted to do out of as much out of passion and for a bit of fun, as much as just the pure commercial aspect of it. So, and given that we, from the agency business, we already had a lot of, I suppose, key contacts at Drummond Golf, which is Australia's largest golf retailer.
So they got, is it franchised?
It is a franchise business.
They've got franchises all over the country now.
Yeah, they've got 50, I think. Yeah.
OptiShot, for those who don't know, is like a home golf simulator.
Yeah, I suppose it's a consumer version of what you may be familiar with seeing in large golf stores or hotel resorts and things where it measures your club head speed. So you basically hit a real golf ball with your own clubs off a small swing pad that's about 37 centimetres by 24. And that's got some sensors in there. Some
about 37 by 24.
I know, you can tell that I've rehearsed that pitch, haven't I? But, so it's got some sensors in there. So you hit the golf ball off that and it measures your club head speed, your face angle at impact, your swing path, your tempo, and your face contact, whether you hit it on the toe, the centre, or the heel of the club. So from those metrics, it can recreate a golf shot. So it runs on any Windows-based computer. It comes with a 10-foot USB cable that you hook up to any Windows computer. And you can play rounds of golf at any. It's got about 18 different courses on there. So you can play full rounds of golf, hit everything from driver through to putter, on some of the most famous golf courses in the world.
Awesome.
Or you can treat it as I more often do, rather than the gamification of it. I treat it more as a practice tool. So it's got a practice mode where you can just drop a ball anywhere on any course. So it might be the 18th hole at Pebble Beach in the middle of the 18th fairway.
Awesome.
And just hit the same shot over and over, whether it's a 6-iron or a 7-iron, depending on how far out you put it. And you can just repeat the same shot over and over, and the system will tell you whether you had your face open, what your club head speed was, and so it's a really cool product. But I suppose the justification for getting into it from a commercial perspective was that we already did have the contacts at Drummond Golf.
That's a question. I'm going to interrupt you for a second, because the question I have is, how do you go about saying, hey, Mr. Contact, I'm here owning an app development company doing software, selling you software development, and tomorrow, hey, I'm calling you up to sell you some imported hardware. Like, how do you actually, have that conversation and make that happen? Because I think, my first reaction is from the other end of the phone call, it's like, well, are you an app developer or a golf wholesaler? How do you make that transition in conversation?
Well, I suppose the nature of our relationship with Drummond Golf dictated that was a fairly seamless one. So the nature of the relationship was that we do meet with them regularly, kind of once a month, to either update their app or add some new features, which is what the guys are doing at the moment. And during the course of one of those conversations happened to fall during the 10-month period that we were kind of negotiating the distributorship with the suppliers in the US. And so we met in that period, and it was just out of conversation, or seemingly out of conversation, that we kind of mentioned this product and had they heard of it and did they know anything about it, and they hadn't. So I kind of pointed them in the direction, just said, look, just out of interest, have a little look at this promo video, and send them a link to the US promo video. And they were back to me in a flash, and they said, this is awesome, this is so cool, we'd absolutely love to at least have a look at this. So I said, well, we're in the process of negotiating a distributorship. Let me get a sample unit and I'll send it to you. And if it turns out that it's of interest to you, then all of a sudden the notion of this distributorship becomes a lot more interesting to me as well.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of how that went. And we didn't. I think if it wasn't for that, I suppose. Did that just fail again, mate? Is it just?
Nah, it's cool.
Oh, it's all right. Sorry.
It's all right.
That if it was the instance that we were just starting from scratch, the approach wouldn't be overly different in that. Because, again, a company like Drummond Golf or a Rebel Sport or a House of Golf is the only other one that we're in at the moment, that any of these major, I suppose, retail companies, especially the franchise-owned ones, get approached by that many different products every single day. 99% of them never see a spot on the shelf. That to have some really, really good, easy-to-watch, fast digital resources makes it so much easier to, I suppose, spark that interest. So for us, we're fortunate that the head office in the US have put together some really, really, really awesome promo videos. Everything from little 30-second videos up to, I think, 38-minute telly spots type thing. So we were able to utilise those in a really warm sense.
Yeah.
But even if it wasn't, I suppose, to be more beneficial to those maybe watching that are starting from scratch without that existing contact, that to be able to send through some digital resources, even if it's a short presentation. I know you once showed me a presentation that you did with just narrating a PowerPoint.
Oh, that was an app thing. That was
an app thing. It was. That's right.
Sort of tied all together. That was a video that I put together based on an iPhone app idea that I sent to a mutual friend, Neil Strauss, who then got to me in a flash as well, saying this is a really cool idea. And we'll link up to that underneath the video as well.
I think it's worthwhile. It's really good.
So that was why I actually used video, a really easy video, and just some very basic mock-ups to actually get an app deal with a New York Times best-selling author and things like with Neil Strauss. So
I think something like that's really powerful. So I don't think again, don't get caught up on the polish. It doesn't have to be that polished.
Yeah.
If the product's good enough and you conduct yourself with sincerity and professionalism, I think that accommodates for any lack of polish that you may see on there.
All right, so one final question before we kind of, well, actually two final questions before we finish up this BBQ+A.
Yes.
One is, what was the biggest takeaway you've learnt by importing? Maybe we can get you back on another edition of BBQ+A and talk about sort of the whole importing side of things and that whole journey.
Yeah.
But what's the biggest takeaway you've had or biggest learning you've had in this importing game?
Look, I'm fairly new to the importing game. As you're aware, I've only been in the importing game for around about 6 months, but I suppose one thing that I challenge, I suppose, that we've found with this is that because we're selling primarily to House of Golf and Drum and Golf, both franchise businesses,
Yep.
that it is really, really, really time consuming and really resource intensive, which for at the moment is just me 'cause it's a bit of fun. I enjoy going visiting all the golf stores anyway. And we haven't got the vast product range to be hiring reps at the moment either. So because we're selling to a franchise company, the notion of visiting every single store and literally having to sell it into every single store. So yes, we've got the endorsement from head office. They think it's a quality product. It ticks the boxes that it needs to be on the shelf in Drum and Golf. But ultimately, every store is owned by...
And they make their own decisions.
They make their own decisions. So in that instance, that's a real challenge. I'm not sure that I'm necessarily saying I would have done anything differently.
Well, let me ask you this question. This is something you might not have even asked yet. How do you get in the catalogues of those franchisees? Because if it's a franchise and it's a franchisees who decide what stock to have, obviously one way to sort of force them to hold the stock would be to get it in the actual brand catalogue. Yeah,
look, that's something that we weren't in early enough to be in. They only do quarterly catalogues, so every quarter. We weren't in early enough to be in the Christmas one, which is their major one, obviously, for the year. The next most major one is the March one, because that's when the US Masters is on and everyone's kind of up and about, interested. All the golf fanatics kind of come out of the woodworks at that time. So we're really, really hopeful that we will be in the March one. Interesting. And the final question, which I ask everybody, whether they're guests on the Preneurcast podcast or any sort of conversation I do on video, is what is the one question I haven't asked you that I should have asked you? You got me on the spot now. I should have paid more attention to those podcasts of yours that I listened to. I should listen all the way to the end. It's always a question, mate. What is the one question I didn't ask you that I should have asked you? What's something that you think is important people to know that I haven't asked you or led you towards? What comes next? Oh, maybe an exit strategy. I mean, an exit strategy. I suppose it's something that I've never thought a lot about, but it's something that I don't know. Some of the other things that you've been up to lately is kind of talking about exit strategies with some other companies that you've bought acquiring stakes in or become into, and I suppose that's something that maybe not a question that I'd be saying you should be asking me. Maybe a question I'd love to be asking somebody else. Just in terms of exit strategy, not so much in terms of getting out of the business altogether, but in terms of divesting your interests a little bit, and that's something that I do find very interesting, even if over the years. Awesome, Josh. Thank you very much for your time, buddy, for this very first BBQ+A. Much appreciated. No worries, mate. Thanks for the sausages. Anytime. Hope everyone got some huge value out of this, took lots of notes, and we'll definitely do this again with another barbecue, with another guest at another time. So thank you very much. Don't forget to share the video if you enjoyed it on Facebook and Twitter and all that sort of good stuff, and we'll see you next time. Blinded by